Okay, so welcome, hello, Fantasy Fellowshippers. I am Max, and with me here today is the voracious Sunyi Dean, author and consumer of The Book Eaters, part Victorian Gothic horror, part wholesome family bonding, part escaping patriarchal norms, but all a deliciously modern anti-fairy tale where happy endings aren't always there. And it is very easy to see why this book was one of Goodreads' most anticipated books of 2022. It's a beautiful, delicate, yet cruel look at motherhood and traditional values, and is a superbly written debut, and we're thrilled to have you here with us, Sunny. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's really good to be here.
Thank you. So this is part of Fantasy Fellowship Con, so it's our weekend of author Q&As and workshops. And so why don't we start off just a bit of background on you and rewind the clock on how you got into writing and what were you doing before you first sat down to write those words on paper?
So I got into writing very late, probably about age 29 or 30. I think when I was a kid reading lots of fantasy books, I had this idea about 11 or 12 that it would be really cool to write one. And then I realized that everyone else wanted to do that too, and it wasn't such a unique idea. And I just put it aside for a really long time because there were other things going on and it's so difficult to pursue. And then I think I had a little bit of a crisis as 30 was approaching, and I realized this idea for a book that I wanted to do, I'd never even started. So I wrote one and it was terrible and nobody wanted it. I wrote another one and it was a bit better, but nobody wanted it. And this is the third one I've written and it's finally found a home.
Well, we're very glad that it does. And oh God, that's I need to get writing then.
Sorry.
You're going to give me my own little crisis here. Great, so thank you. So we have quite a few questions that have been submitted by our members. And we've narrowed it down as much as we can. So if you could consume knowledge like one of the book eaters, what would you choose to learn? And of the books you own, what would you most like to consume?
I would probably pick things I'm bad at, like languages or maths. I know that's a bit of a dry answer, but I really struggle to learn languages. And I would love to read Latin, so I could read Milton's poetry. I would love to have ancient Sumerians, I could read Gilgamesh. For the books that I own, probably, this is going to sound really pretentious, I'm sorry, but The History of Western Philosophy by Bertrand Russell, which is a book I love, but it's like that, it's dense, it's vast, and you can't remember all of that information unless you consume it the way a book eater does, and then it'll be in your brain forever.
Well, yeah, very fair choices. Given that let's go back to the fact that you said that the Book Eaters wasn't the first book that you wrote. Yeah. So when you were writing it then, did you think that this was going to be the one and this was what publishers were going to love, or did it come to you as a bit of a surprise? And are you going to go back and revisit some of those previous works or incorporate them in any way?
So I think every book was a different process. The first book was so narrow. I think there are probably 5 people on the planet who might have found something in it interesting. I'm not sure I was one of them. And the second book, it kind of, I was trying to focus on the emotional connection and the characters, but the plot and the world building weren't there. And this one, I felt like I had some of the elements I want, but because I was aiming for cross-genre and I was aiming for contemporary fantasy, which at the time was considered a dead genre to write in, I was a little bit uncertain. I mean, my agent did say this is going to be a hard sell, probably, before I started writing it. So I went into it knowing it was a gamble, but it was what I wanted. Yeah, well, I tried to do, she suggested an epic fantasy first, after we died on submission the first time. And it just wasn't working for me. I just wasn't getting into it. So yeah, I do think about market some, but I think some of the best advice I ever got from Absolute Write Forums and other writers is to write what's in your heart, but with your practical hat on. So write what interests you, and you can keep an eye on the market, but there's no point kind of forcing it because it just doesn't work. I would try and revisit one of the 2 books, maybe the second one at some point. The first one's just a loss. I think it's just a learning experience.
Yeah, very fair. Well, then, What was different with this one? What kind of inspired you with Book Eaters, given, it is a pretty interesting premise, and quite a few people have commented in being like, well, is this from the phrase to devour a book?
No, although I'm sure that was a gift to the marketing department. It came from a lot of different things. There's a manga series called Book Eaters, so there are kind of like Japanese yokai who eat books. There are, I think, the way that we think of books naturally as readers, we think of them as things that we consume. We use food words for them, like spicy and sweet and bitter, and it's a natural extension of how we already engage with that media. And just little bits and pieces. There's a very obscure 90s cartoon I grew up watching, which has a sorcerer who eats books to gain their power, and things like that that just stay in your mind. And so at some point,
what was the cartoon?
It was called Gargoyles. If you were my age, you might have grown up watching it.
I'll make a note. We've been getting a lot of recommendations from the previous authors as to books and TV shows to watch.
I don't know if you could find it anymore, but it was one of the weirder things I've seen on television as a kid. It had gargoyles as main characters and time-traveling sorcerers named Macbeth, and Avalon was there, and it was kind of a hot mess, but it was really fun. So I guess it was just a lot of different sources and just thinking about fairy tales, the land itself. I last done a book set in Midwest America. The first one was epic fantasy, the second was set in Midwest America. This one I wanted it to be in England, a kind of tribute to Yorkshire and the land that I love up here, and the north particularly. So London gets a mention, but nobody goes to London in the Book Eaters, and that's by design. It's a great city, but it's in like every fantasy book ever. So
that actually very nicely answers our next question of why did you decide to set the book on the Yorkshire moors?
I live in Yorkshire, and I grew up reading Yorkshire. One of the first books I really remember loving as a kid was Jane Eyre, and that's kind of set on the moors and Wuthering Heights. And before I'd ever been here, I kind of had this idea about the moors. So when I moved to the UK, it was almost like a pilgrimage experience, getting to see the moors. And all these locations that read like a fantasy story.
Yeah, you do get quite a lot of those, like, Wuthering Heights or Bleak House-esque vibes from Book Eaters. So another question is that you've said before that the book is standalone. Would you consider writing any more within this world, or have you drafted, any storylines or threads that didn't make it into the final text you'd like to revisit as a novella or bonus chapters in an edition?
It's not really up to me. So when I was writing it, I did have issues with there was too much plot. There was a whole section I wanted to do in Japan. I wanted to wrap up things with another one of Devon's family members who gets left out at the end. People who read it will know who I mean. And there was just no space. But I did think when I was writing it, if it gets picked up, it'll probably be a series. That's what happens to fantasy. That's not how Tor envisioned it. Tor said we feel very strongly it should be a standalone. They didn't want it to be the next kind of Dresden Files where the plot becomes increasingly about the world building in a way, if that makes sense. And I did understand that decision, and I was kind of relieved, to be honest, because I was a bit tired of writing it. So I would like to wrap it up in future, at least another standalone, but it's dependent on Tor. At the moment, I'm tied into writing more standalones. So when that's finished, then we can ask them about it.
Very fair. Yeah, I know exactly which character you're talking about, and I really wanted to ask it as a question, but it's too much of a spoiler to put in for those who haven't read it yet. So given that this is your first published book, what's the most unexpected part of the whole process been for you? And did you have any particular way you celebrated when you first got that news that this book is going to be published?
So we had a very dramatic submission story. I don't know if people here know much about publishing. The second book I had an agent for, and it didn't sell on submission, and that was just 18 months of slow rejections. So when this book went on submission, that's what we were prepared for. That's what I was waiting for. And Tor preempted it in 4 days. I mean, my agent rang me the end of that same week, and I almost had a heart attack, basically. It was really... so celebrate. Well, once I got paid, just for the experience of it. Firstly, I bought a new laptop because mine was dying, and secondly, I went to a bookstore and I just bought every book that I felt like buying, which is not as many as it sounds. I'm very picky, so I think I bought like 5, but it was still extravagant, and that was my celebration.
And what can you tell us what those celebration books were? Do you remember?
One was, I can't remember the title of it now, the short story collection by N.K. Jemisin. One was The Golden Key by, what's her name? Marion. Sorry, I'm so bad with names. I picked it up because of the title. I recognized it. One was, I think it was it's Rosewater by Tade Thompson. I can't remember the other two now. That was like 3 years ago. No, 2 years ago. So, but yeah, I think I just bought whatever I liked the look of and took it home.
Yeah, that seems like a good celebration to me.
Yeah.
Sorry,
you're asking for things that surprise me. I guess publishing is very strange as an industry. The whole industry surprised me, and how different experiences are, and how much hinges on your deal. Basically, that there's this element of the moment your book is bought, its fate is decided almost, not entirely, but almost, and that's a bit scary and a bit weird.
Fair enough. So another question we have is, so we don't see many mothers in fantasy, and some of our members found it really wonderful to see. Was it particularly important for you to tell the story from this point of view, or did it just occur naturally? Or what was the inspiration behind this particular choice?
It was originally, I think, when I had different ideas for the Book Eaters, it grew out of a short story. And then at some point I paired it with this kind of mother-son duo. I do think, because fantasy and sci-fi, we have a lot of complexity in our books with the world building that can kind of regular literature doesn't have. And one way to strip back that complexity is to have your family members dead, have the parents gone. It can focus the story a bit. But it does mean there's a lot of dead family. And I did want to see kind of slightly older women. I wanted Devon to be 40, and I couldn't make the timeline work for that. So she's almost 30. Slightly older women, parents being alive or present, and to go the other way and to dive into that complexity. But I guess the side effect of that is it does take over the story. I mean, a lot of people have commented on the fact there's other bigger things going on, and Devon can't even get into that because the family side just eats the whole story.
If you could spend a day with another author and to discuss their work, whom would you choose?
I would pick Gene Wolfe, who sadly died a few years ago. So I never got to meet him. I did write to him, but he was very sick at the time. I think he's just this incredibly fascinating and intelligent person. Everything that he writes is just kind of amazing to me. He's not a very commercial writer. I don't know how many people in this audience will know him. But I would have loved to talk to him about it, I guess, his work and his beliefs and his life.
Fair. Another question we've received is that some of our members have listened to your Q&A with the narrator for your book, Katie. They loved the conversation, and in it you mentioned that the Mind Eaters are inspired by vampires, but is more of a modern twist on them. So if you were a Mind Eater, is there a person whose knowledge or life experience you would like to consume? You can take anyone, real or fictional.
Oh man, I hadn't even thought of that. I guess, I don't know, someone just like super smart. I don't know. I feel like it's sacrilegious to say this, but someone like Stephen Hawking or something, because I want to know what it's like to be that smart, to have that understanding of I'm very bad at maths. I think I might be dyscalculic or something. I'm very bad at maths and science, and I would love to be amazing at it. I missed I was sick the day they handed out autistic math skills. So I don't have any, and I would love to just have a glimpse of his brain, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I did maths, and I still have no idea what I'm doing with it. What is the weirdest thing that you found yourself having to Google for research for this book, or any of your previous attempts at writing?
Oh man, you Google lots of weird things, and someone asks you that, it just goes.
Or any particularly like ridiculous rabbit holes you've gone down?
Oh man, there are a ton of different things. Oh, okay. I guess when exactly CCTV was in train stations in the UK and like having to, it changed across the country, and I was trying to work out whether it was CCTV in the train station when Devon was there, when that in this big fight scene, and it just all kinds of things to, yeah, little details like that. When specific technologies were developed, how realistic certain things were. I think I went down a rabbit hole of idea for the book as well. I guess for the current thing I'm writing, I ended up going down a rabbit hole of exactly what kind of stoves people had in like 1920s South China, which is weirdly difficult to find.
What type of stoves did they have in 1920s to South China?
Charcoal and wood mostly. And I guess this is a bit grim, but where exactly you can stab somebody that does like a lot of damage. So it incapacitates them, but they can recover in a day or two. I didn't end up using it in the end, but the answer is you can stab them in the lung, kind of, because then that means their lung deflates. They need to go to hospital and have it reinflated. But if it's a clean wound, they'll recover. Anyway.
I don't know what to do with this information. So did you find out when CCTV was put into the Devon train station, or did you kind of take a little bit of artistic liberty there?
It was in London at that time, but not up north. We get everything last up here, so I did take a bit of license with it. There are some things like some of the video games mentioned are a couple of years earlier than they should be. Little things like that, where it's just like, I can't be bothered. Let's change it.
So yes, you live in the Yorkshire region. So have you visited many? You said you went on like a pilgrimage when you first arrived. Have you visited many of these kind of bleak house-esque houses and sites that you've written about as like research for this book?
So most of the places mentioned are places I've been because I found that easier. I did have to go, I think when I was looking up the big manor at the end, Traquair, which does feature a lot, I was looking for a place to base a fantasy manor on and ended up just using Traquair wholesale because it was perfect. It has kind of the maze and the brewery and the main house. And after the book was bought, I did go with my partner. We went around to look at it. It was really interesting, actually. It's a very cool place. I don't think the guy was impressed when I told him that I was looking at it for a book and that oh no, I can't say that. That's a spoiler. But yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, I think I have a link on Goodreads in my notes about the book, which is just photographs of the different areas and the riverine islands and River Tweed and stuff.
Okay, so that means that the like family mansions, these are all based on real places then?
Those aren't so much because there weren't any in the right places. Basically, they need to be more out of the way. But Traquair is, and the towns are real, and places like Brighton that I really enjoyed and just visiting, and they're all in there, and I found excuses for them to feature. So,
is there any moment during the Book Eaters where you experienced writer's block, and if so, how did you overcome it?
I think for most of the book, actually, it just took me forever. I think the book before I'd written in about 7 months, and this one took me almost 3 years, and it just seemed to drag and drag. I was so tired and burnt out. There was a lot going on, I think. Yeah, I did kind of, I think I've mentioned it in a couple other places online, but I did kind of hit this block where I didn't know how I wanted the book to end. And when I started writing it, I was like married and settled and in a family and so on, and ended up separating from my partner during lockdown and moving out. And there was something about the clarity of that action after I moved out where I realized I knew how to finish the book. So I don't have any particular tips for writer's block other than when I'm stuck, it means something's not working in the novel. And it just means there's something there that my brain is going, no, this doesn't work. You need to stop before you continue. I don't know if that's true for other people.
What is a book that you've read, say, this year that you've most enjoyed?
So this year I've been drafting. I've not read a huge amount, but I did. I mean, you're going to hear from him, I think, possibly today or tomorrow. I really enjoyed Justice of Kings. That's not normally my wheelhouse, but I thought, oh, that was fantastic. I did enjoy
Yeah, I
Sorry.
agree with you there.
It was big and it was sprawling and it just had lots of things going on. I think I can't. Was it earlier this year? Or was it year before? I love the crap out of Echo Wife. It's a sci-fi thriller by Sarah Gailey, and it's like got Killing Eve vibes, but with clones, and it's nuts, and I love it.
That sounds quite up my alley. I must have a look up on that one.
It's about, very quickly, it's about a woman who, a woman scientist who discovers her husband is cheating on her with the clone that he made of her using her research, which he stole, and then he reprograms the clone to be more malleable and like to adore him and stuff. And it's interesting.
Let's suppose that Book Eaters is going to be adapted into a film. Who would your ideal castings be?
I don't know actors very well. I'm really sorry. To be honest, I think I might be an anomaly in this. I've never, like, if it gets made into a film, that's great, but only in the sense that it brings in an extra check. I don't worry about whether, like, I write books because I like books. I'm not that fussed about the film TV side. I don't know, to be honest. I don't know actors well enough. Sorry for the disappointing answer.
No problem. So another question we've gotten is that the book is kind of set in a very modern, it is set in the modern age, but
kind of.
most of the characters and interactions basically occur as if everyone's just stepped out of a Jane Austen novel. So was that your intent? Did you want this like stark contrast between kind of the old-fashioned life of the book eaters and a modern society, or what were you kind of going for with that?
I think you have that in Britain already, and you have it in your literature, and you have it in the people. I was always really struck by it because I love crime fiction and crime lit, and I'll read something like Agatha Christie where all the people are kind of these genteel semi-aristocrats, and their lives are so different. And then I put on like Frost or a Frost audiobook or something, and it's so gritty and modern, and there's a real divide there. But I think both sides are really interesting to me. That you still have huge class divides in your literature and culture as well. I think that's a big part of what makes Britain feel the way it does. Maybe just an outsider's perspective.
All very fair. Yeah, I get what you mean with the Agatha Christie book. Same with something like Woodhouse or anything written from that time. So I don't want to risk giving any spoilers, but in the Book Eaters, there are hints towards the origins of the Book Eaters. Is that something you can see yourself exploring in the future, or are we just going to be left with this mystery for the next however long?
So I didn't originally have it that clear cut, and originally because there's a couple of different factions in the families, and one of the rifts between the factions is they had, in my kind of earlier drafts, they had different ideas about where they're from. It was like the way that people of different religions will disagree about the origins of Earth or humans. So they had different, some of them thought that they were from one kind of background and some of them thought they were from another. And when one of those factions got scrubbed out, it removed a lot of complexity to take that away. And I just left in the stuff about the collector as this is what they think happened, but they don't know, and they don't have many records. And Devon doesn't care enough to investigate. It's just not in her personality. I think a more reflective character would be more interested than she was in her own origins.
Quite ironic that they don't have any records, given the bookcase-filled houses that you describe in all of in your book.
Yeah, so what they originally said is, I think in earlier drafts, Devon makes reference to the fact that they had records and destroyed them. And that I took all that out again because there was so much going on in the book that editing was basically a process of making it less complicated. And there was just stuff that had to go and had to go and had to go. And I know that's frustrating for pure fantasy readers who like the explanations and like the world building, but one of the things when you're trying to write cross genres, you have to bear in mind the other genre that you're trying to appeal to. And mainstream readers actually don't like as much world building, and a lot of them struggle with the amount that's in there already. So it was a tightrope line between disappointing people a bit too much on either side, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm definitely one of those people that prefers
Yes.
to know everything. I want all the world building.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Were you a Wheel of Time fan?
Yes, very much so. Wheel of Time, Sanderson.
Wheel of Time is written for people who want to know every detail. And I loved it. I know I loved those books as a kid. They were like my teenage obsession. So.
So there have been a few editions of Book Eaters done. We've got your sound edition. The Broken Binding has an edition. I believe this month there's another edition going out. But
you can briefly see it because it's now out and people are receiving it now. So by the time this recording goes live, it will not be secret anymore. So yeah, that was my great one. It's pretty. I like it. I don't know what's in the box. I just got a copy of the book.
Is there an edition that you like the most? And do you like what they've done with kind of this cover of just like an almost torn away book as opposed to the normal cover, which is the mother and son made out of paper?
Oh yeah, so this is a variation on the UK cover. So most of them are UK covers. That is the American one. I love the art in the American one, but maybe just because I've lived here so long, I tend to prefer UK covers. I really like text-based graphics and stuff. So yeah, I like the art. I love the art on the American one, but I love the cover design of the cover on the UK one more, probably.
That's fair. I think I agree.
Yeah.
So we're coming up to the last few minutes. So before we let you go, we have a readathon coming up next month, and we're asking the authors to submit prompts for our members to choose from for their final book. Do you have a prompt for us?
Prompt I would suggest is something cross-genre, so like science fantasy or sci-fi thriller, or you can interpret that how you like. I love cross-genre books. There's quite a few good ones out there these days. Well, if anyone's ever short of suggestions, I can put up a list. But yeah, I think there should be enough to pick from.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Sunny. If anyone is interested in reading Book Eaters who hasn't already, on our website, sunnydean.com, you can read the opening few pages to get an idea as to what to expect. The book is available from Waterstones, The Broken Binding, and really anywhere you can find your books. If you do read it, make sure to review it positively, I hope. And yeah, we will be here all weekend. These recordings will be available afterwards for those who have a ticket. If you've enjoyed this, please join us for the rest of our author Q&As and find us at fantasy-fellowship.co.uk or on our Discord or Instagram at fantasy_fellowship. Sunny, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming.